you ever noticed how betrayal never feels like betrayal at first? It doesn't come with a warning or a loud announcement. Instead, it slips in quietly, disguising itself as friendship, loyalty, or trust, until the moment it strikes. But what if I told you that no betrayal is truly silent? That before someone turns against you, they always leave behind clues? It's like a spider weaving its web, silent and unnoticed. The prey walks freely, believing it's safe, but the moment it gets too comfortable, the web tightens and the spider strikes. Or think of a crack in a dam. Small, harmless at first, but with every passing moment, the pressure builds. And when it finally gives way, the destruction is unstoppable. That's how betrayal works. It builds slowly, quietly, until it's too late to stop. Because while you assume loyalty, they are testing how much they can get away with. While you trust their words, they are carefully deciding when to walk away. And when the moment comes, they act as if it was never betrayal at all. But while they're setting the stage, you have a choice. Stay blind to the signs or recognize them before it's too late. And when you learn to see betrayal coming, that's when you take your power back. The moment you stop ignoring the signs, you stop giving them the opportunity to strike. So, how do you recognize when someone is planning to betray you before it's too late? Stay until the end, because once you understand these signs, you'll never miss them again. Let's get started. Number 1. They start acting overly nice. Let's talk about one of the biggest red flags that someone is planning to betray you. They start acting overly nice. At first, it might feel like a good thing. Maybe this person suddenly becomes more helpful, more generous, or more complimentary than ever before. They go out of their way to check in on you, offer favors, or agree with everything you say. But something about it feels off. It's not their usual behavior. It's not coming from a place of genuine care. It's calculated. And if their sudden warmth feels unnatural, trust your instincts. Here's the truth. Betrayers often overcompensate with fake kindness before they strike. Why? Because they know what they're about to do. Guilt makes them act extra friendly, as if their kindness can somehow balance out their deception. Or worse, they do it to lower your guard, to make sure you won't suspect them. So when they betray you, it hits harder. It's a strategic move, not an emotional one. And the sooner you recognize it, the better. This is where Stoic wisdom comes in. Epictetus once said, "A deceitful man wears a mask of kindness until his moment arrives." In other words, those who plan to betray you don't show up as enemies. They disguise themselves as friends. They smile, they flatter, they pretend to be on your side, but it's just a mask. And if you look closely, you'll see the cracks. The excessive compliments, the forced enthusiasm, the sudden shift in behavior. It's all a performance. Let me share a story. A guy I know, let's call him Daniel, once worked with someone who was always competitive with him. Their relationship was professional, but never particularly warm. Then, out of nowhere, this coworker started acting overly friendly. They would praise Daniel in front of others, offer to help with his workload, and even bring him coffee. At first, Daniel thought maybe they had just changed for the better. But deep down, something didn't feel right. And sure enough, a few weeks later, that same coworker secretly tried to take credit for Daniel's work and position themselves for a promotion. The excessive kindness? It was all an act to make sure Daniel didn't see the betrayal coming. So how do you handle this? First, trust your gut. If someone's kindness feels unnatural, don't dismiss your instincts. Second, observe patterns, not moments. Real kindness is consistent, while fake kindness comes in waves. And third, stay guarded. If someone's behavior shifts too suddenly, don't let their words distract you from their actions. At the end of the day, true friends don't need to overcompensate with sudden kindness. If someone starts acting overly nice out of nowhere, ask yourself, are they being genuine, or are they just waiting for the perfect moment to strike? Number 2, they fish for personal information. Let's talk about one of the most subtle yet dangerous warning signs. Someone who suddenly becomes overly curious about your personal life. At first, it might seem harmless. Maybe they start asking more questions than usual, showing interest in your goals, struggles, or even past mistakes. They seem eager to listen, to understand you better. But if you pay attention, you'll notice something strange. They're not sharing much about themselves. The conversation is always centered around you, and their curiosity feels strategic. Here's the truth. If someone suddenly becomes overly curious about your plans, weaknesses, or secrets, they might be gathering ammunition against you. Betrayal doesn't happen randomly. It's often carefully planned. And before someone can strike, they need information. They need to know what makes you tick, where your vulnerabilities are, and what they can use against you when the time is right. They don't ask because they care. They ask because they're collecting data, building a weapon they might one day use. This is where Stoic wisdom comes in. Seneca once said, "Silence is a lesson in itself." In other words, not everything needs to be shared. The more you reveal, the more power you give to those who might not have your best interests at heart. True wisdom is knowing when to speak and who to trust. If someone's curiosity feels unnatural, you don't owe them answers. Sometimes, your best defense is to say less and observe more. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Sarah, had a coworker who was never particularly close to her. Then, out of nowhere, this person started taking an unusual interest in Sarah's personal life. They would ask about her job satisfaction, her future plans, even personal struggles she had mentioned in passing. Sarah, being naturally open, didn't think much of it, until she found out that this same coworker had been sharing her words with others, twisting them to make Sarah look unreliable. The sudden interest wasn't about friendship, it was about gathering leverage. And Sarah realized that she had given them the very information they used against her. So how do you protect yourself from people like this? First, limit what you share. If someone's curiosity feels excessive, keep your answers vague. Second, observe their patterns. Do they ask a lot about you, but reveal little about themselves? That's a red flag. And third, remember, your personal life is not for public access. If someone's questions make you uncomfortable, you don't need an excuse to protect your privacy. At the end of the day, not everyone who listens is listening with good intentions. If someone starts fishing for information, ask yourself, are they trying to understand me, or are they trying to prepare for a move against me? Because the wrong words shared with the wrong person can one day come back as a weapon. Stay guarded, stay observant, and never underestimate the power of silence. Number 3, they change their behavior without explanation. Let's talk about one of the most overlooked but telling signs of betrayal. A sudden and unexplained change in someone's behavior. Maybe they used to be warm, engaged, and reliable, but now they're distant. Conversations that once flowed easily feel strained. Plans they used to be excited about are suddenly canceled. And when you ask what's wrong, you get vague answers like, just busy, or nothing's wrong. But deep down, you know something has shifted. Here's the truth. If someone starts distancing themselves, canceling plans, or acting indifferent without reason, they might be preparing for betrayal. People don't just wake up one day and decide to withdraw from someone they care about. When their behavior changes suddenly without any explanation, it often means something is happening behind the scenes, and in many cases, that something is a betrayal in progress. This is where Stoic wisdom comes in. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Watch what a man does, not what he says." Words can be manipulated. Someone can tell you everything is fine, while their actions scream the opposite. But actions don't lie. If someone starts treating you differently for no clear reason, pay attention not to what they say, but to what they do, because behavior always reveals the truth. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Emily, had a best friend she trusted completely. They did everything together, always making plans, supporting each other, and sharing their struggles. But one day, something changed. Her friend became distant, stopped responding as much, and started canceling plans. When Emily asked what was wrong, her friend brushed it off. "Oh, just been busy, that's all." But something felt off. Then, weeks later, Emily found out the truth. Her friend had been talking behind her back, spreading lies and turning mutual friends against her. The sudden change in behavior? It was the first warning sign. Her friend had already decided to betray her, and the emotional distance was just part of the process. So how do you handle this? First, don't ignore the signs. If someone's behavior shifts without reason, trust your instincts. Second, observe patterns, not excuses. Everyone gets busy, but if they're consistently withdrawing, something deeper is happening. And third, prepare yourself emotionally. If someone is creating distance, they might already be making moves behind your back. Don't wait for the betrayal to hit. Start protecting yourself now. At the end of the day, loyalty doesn't disappear overnight. If someone is pulling away without an explanation, there's usually a reason. They just aren't telling you what it is. Watch their actions, not their words, because behavior always reveals the truth long before betrayal strikes. Number 4. They form unusual alliances. Let's talk about one of the clearest signs that someone may be planning to betray you. They start forming unexpected alliances. You notice they're suddenly spending time with people who have always been against you. They begin speaking highly of those who never had your best interests at heart. And even though they used to agree with you, now they seem to be siding with people who have openly doubted or criticized you in the past. At first, it might seem like nothing. Maybe they're just being open-minded or trying to get along with everyone. But if you look deeper, something isn't right. Here's the truth. If someone starts aligning with those who have been against you or speaking well of those who dislike you, be cautious. Loyalty doesn't shift randomly. There's always a reason behind it. When someone who was once in your corner starts cozying up to people who have opposed you, it's often a sign that they're repositioning themselves. They may be laying the groundwork for betrayal, testing the waters to see how much they can distance themselves from you before making their final move. This is where Stoic wisdom comes in. Epictetus once said, "A man is known by the company he keeps." Pay close attention to the company people choose. A loyal person does not suddenly switch sides. A true friend does not start aligning with those who have worked against you. And if they do, it's not by accident. They are making a choice, and that choice is revealing their intentions. Let me share a story. A guy I know, let's call him Alex, worked closely with a colleague who he considered a friend. They supported each other at work, had each other's backs, and always stayed aligned on major decisions. But one day, Alex started noticing something strange. His colleague began forming alliances with people who had previously opposed them. He started agreeing with those who had openly criticized Alex's work, even defending them in conversations. At first, Alex brushed it off, thinking maybe his colleague was just trying to maintain peace. But soon after, that same colleague went behind his back, siding with their rivals in a major company decision, one that completely cut Alex out. The betrayal didn't happen overnight. It started the moment his so-called friend began switching alliances. So how do you handle this? First, pay attention to sudden shifts. If someone who was always loyal to you starts aligning with people who have been against you, don't ignore it. Second, don't confront too soon. Observe first. Watch how they interact, listen to what they say, and see where their loyalty truly lies. And third, protect yourself. If someone is drifting toward those who dislike you, there's a chance they're gathering information, positioning themselves, or planning something against you. At the end of the day, alliances reveal intentions. If someone who once stood by your side is now standing with those who have tried to bring you down, take it as a warning. Loyalty does not shift without reason, and when it does, betrayal is often not far behind. Number 5. They subtly undermine you in public. Let's talk about one of the earliest warning signs of betrayal. Someone who subtly undermines you in public. It doesn't start with outright attacks. It starts with little things. A joke at your expense, a backhanded compliment, or a moment of public embarrassment that they brush off as harmless fun. At first, you might even laugh along, thinking it's nothing. But over time, a pattern emerges. Their words are always just sharp enough to make you uncomfortable, but subtle enough to make it seem like you're overreacting if you call them out. Here's the truth. Betrayal often begins with small jabs, disguised as jokes, backhanded compliments, or moments where they diminish your reputation in front of others. Why? Because it's a test. They want to see how much they can get away with before you push back. They want to weaken your position while maintaining their own. And most importantly, they want to plant seeds of doubt about you in the minds of others. Slowly, carefully, without making it obvious. This is where Stoic wisdom comes in. Seneca once said, "The tongue of a liar is more dangerous than a sword." Words can be weapons. A sword may cut once, but words, when used with precision, can damage your reputation, your confidence, and your relationships over time. A person who constantly makes harmless jokes at your expense isn't joking at all. They're testing the waters of betrayal, and if you let it slide, they'll only push further. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Rachel, had a coworker she considered a friend. They joked around a lot, but one day, Rachel noticed something strange. Every time she spoke up in meetings, this coworker would make little remarks. "Oh wow, now look at Rachel taking charge today," said with a smirk. If Rachel shared an idea, the coworker would nod and say, "That's bold, let's hope it actually works." It was always just subtle enough that no one else seemed to notice the pattern. But Rachel felt it. Every comment chipped away at her credibility, little by little. And sure enough, weeks later, that same coworker openly challenged her authority in front of their boss, positioning themselves as the better option for leadership. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It started with small public jabs, testing how much Rachel would tolerate. So how do you handle this? First, recognize the pattern. If someone consistently makes you the punchline of their jokes, it's not just humor, it's strategy. Second, don't brush it off. If their words make you uncomfortable, address it, privately if necessary, but directly. And third, protect your reputation. If someone is trying to undermine you, counter it by being intentional with your actions and words. Stand firm in who you are and don't let them shape how others perceive you. At the end of the day, betrayal doesn't start with a knife. It starts with words. If someone is consistently undermining you, don't wait for it to escalate. The best way to stop a betrayer is to call out the betrayal before it fully forms. Number 6, they give you confusing or contradictory signals. Let's talk about one of the most frustrating and revealing signs of betrayal. Someone who gives you mixed signals. One moment, they act like your closest ally. The next, they're distant, indifferent, or even dismissive. They tell you they support you, but their actions suggest otherwise. Their energy feels inconsistent. Their words don't quite match their behavior. And when you try to get clarity, they dodge the conversation. Here's the truth. If someone's words and actions don't align, it means they're not being honest. Confusion isn't a sign of complexity, it's a sign of deception. When someone has genuine intentions, you don't have to guess where you stand with them. Their actions and words reinforce each other. But when someone is planning betrayal, they often send mixed signals because they're caught between two conflicting goals, maintaining their image while secretly working against you. This is where Stoic wisdom comes in. Epictetus once said, "Truth needs no rehearsing." Think about that. When someone is being truthful, they don't have to carefully craft their responses or double back on their words. Their actions naturally align with what they say. But a liar, a betrayer, they have to manage two realities. One they show you, and one they're hiding. And the cracks always start to show. Let me share a story. A man I know, let's call him James, was working on a business partnership with someone he trusted. At first, everything seemed fine. His partner was enthusiastic, supportive, and eager to collaborate. But over time, James started noticing inconsistencies. When they spoke privately, the partner was all in, but in group settings, he was vague, hesitant, even dismissive of their shared plans. James also noticed that while his partner would say things like, "I've got your back," he never actually followed through on commitments. And when James confronted him, the partner would laugh it off. "Oh, you're reading too much into things." Weeks later, James found out why. His partner had been secretly negotiating with a competitor behind his back. The mixed signals weren't random. They were a warning sign that his loyalty wasn't real. So how do you handle people like this? First, don't ignore inconsistencies. If someone's actions don't match their words, pay attention. It's rarely accidental. Second, don't let them gaslight you. If you feel confused, it's not because you're overthinking. It's because they're being unclear on purpose. And third, trust patterns, not excuses. One contradiction might be a mistake. Repeated contradictions are a strategy. At the end of the day, truth is simple, but lies require effort. If someone is giving you mixed signals, ask yourself, is this person genuinely confused, or are they trying to confuse me? Because the moment you see through the inconsistency, the betrayal loses its power. Pay attention, and trust what their actions, not their words, are telling you. Number 7, you feel it in your gut. Let's talk about one of the most powerful yet often ignored warning signs of betrayal. Your intuition. You can't always explain it, but something feels off. The words they say sound right, but something about their tone, their energy, or their behavior doesn't sit well with you. Maybe it's the way they hesitate before answering a question, the way they avoid certain topics, or how their actions don't fully match their words. It's subtle, but your subconscious picks up on it before your conscious mind fully understands what's happening. Here's the truth. Your gut instinct isn't just a random feeling. It's your mind picking up on details you haven't consciously processed yet. The subconscious is constantly reading micro-expressions, tone shifts, and behavioral patterns that the logical mind often overlooks. When you sense something isn't right, it's usually because your intuition is detecting something that logic hasn't yet caught up to. And the biggest mistake you can make? Dismissing it. This is where Stoic wisdom comes in. Marcus Aurelius once said, "A wise man trusts his reason, not his emotions, yet never ignores the signs." Stoicism teaches us to think critically, to not be ruled by feelings alone. But that doesn't mean ignoring what our instincts are telling us. A rational mind uses both logic and awareness. If your gut is telling you something is off, don't react emotionally, but don't ignore it either. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Olivia, had a business partner she had always trusted. On the surface, everything seemed fine. The numbers were good, the communication was steady, and there were no obvious red flags. But something felt different. She couldn't put her finger on it, but there was a shift in the way her partner spoke, a forced enthusiasm that didn't match his usual confidence. She noticed how he started avoiding direct eye contact and became oddly defensive about harmless questions. Nothing was wrong, but something was off. Instead of brushing it aside, Olivia started paying closer attention. And soon, she discovered the truth. Her partner had been secretly setting up a separate deal behind her back. The signs were there all along. Her intuition had warned her before the evidence did. So how do you handle this? First, don't ignore your gut. If something feels off, take it seriously. Second, gather information before reacting. Use your intuition as a guide, but let logic confirm the truth. And third, don't let others talk you out of what you sense. If someone is acting suspiciously and you feel it deep down, trust yourself enough to look deeper. At the end of the day, betrayal is rarely sudden. It builds over time, and often your subconscious sees the pattern before your conscious mind does. Listen to the signs, trust your instincts, and never ignore that quiet voice inside telling you something isn't right. What are your views on this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I will personally read all of your comments. And if you seriously want to level up in life, don't forget to show some love by hitting the like and subscribe button. Stay strong. Until next time.